welcome to the PI Podcast. I'm your host, Matt, and with me, as usual, is my co host, political scientist, meme lord, and bitten by a radioactive Marxist who has sworn his life to fighting crime and capitalism. He is vengeance. He is the night. He is the revolution. Borge!
What the hell? Okay, that's the longest intro, and that's the most surprising one. I was not bitten. I was just yeah. You know what? Never mind. Never mind. What the?
Who was it? Was it a prop?
No, God.
I gave, yeah.
It's Mark's hanging upside down on a web.
Oh, wow. Rare.
Okay, okay.
Anyway,
PI nyo, PI nating lahat. Borge here at your service.
all right. So yeah, that's I just gave you a Halloween costume right now, and we are actually we're releasing this on November, but we're recording at Halloween. Happy Halloween,
Ooh,
Borge.
happy Halloween to you as well.
Spooky.
Ooh.
Yeah. Ooh. And hope you're all safe and from the upcoming storm, which we know is happening.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, stay safe. And well, I know that most people spend their Halloween night trick or treating or partying or watching horror movies, but you know, any conversation with you is scarier than any horror movie.
Ooh, I'm your dissertation. Ooh.
Ah! Yeah. Oh yeah, and that's your costume, the radioactive Marxist. Yeah, trademark that. Anyway, so today we're going. Well, we have an interesting topic today. It's based off like this exchange that we surprisingly had in the last Q&A, and we're wondering like right now, we were asked about the U.S. elections, and you
Mm,
refused to comment. And even today,
mm,
the conclusion of the American elections between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Some people say it was one of the most important and pivotal of the history,
mm.
is coming, and you have no interest in it. So
Yep.
we thought we'd explore that. So why don't you quickly explain that your initial, I know, um, initial ignorance, I suppose, or
Nah, it's
of
more of,
the
indifference would be a more appropriate term. Indifference and ignorance would come
and why the indifference.
next. Wait. Let me ask. When will it conclude? When will the results be out?
Mm, well, on paper they said it'll be done by November 4. So
Mm,
we might have a president, a United States president by the time this video is released. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about why we're talking about it in the first place. It's meta, right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
why do we care? Right. So it's like it's complicated because right now a lot of it is done in mail. So people
Mm,
are, still counting the votes. They're still sending it in. So it's a lot of the PO box. It's on
mm,
the mailmen are the heroes right now of America, the soldiers of American democracy. So it's difficult to know, and we might not know yet, even after this is
mm.
released. So yeah. So why the ignorance?
Well, I'm still
Besides saving
indifferent.
yourself the headache.
Yeah, that's one
Yeah.
thing. First and foremost, I don't think I should allot any more brain cells to it. So that's my primary reason. But
Mm-hmm.
behind that, I think as we would discuss later on, I see this fixation over contemporary American politics as something we can drop for the
Ooh,
sake of something else.
like it's hot.
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, the elections would only affect our country via foreign affairs. And
Mm.
that realm is basically monopolized by diplomats, foreign policy advisors. It is a realm that is not yet penetrated by the public or by the general public for the
Mm-hmm.
longest time. So
Right.
why bother? Why bother over an election you can't
Mm.
even control and whose effects is basically limited when we have bigger
Mm-hmm.
problems facing us?
Mm. Right.
Yeah.
So actually, we in the pre-prod meeting, we actually discussed this, and we had a bit of a
Mm,
disagreement. But today, we're not gonna have a debate, but instead take this doubt seriously and say, why should we care? So maybe ask ourselves, why do we do it in the first place? And perhaps consider,
mm,
is it possible or to drop it? Or maybe there's something necessary that we can learn. Because right now, I think you and I are are political scientists, but
mm,
our seniors, we may not be international relations scholars, but our
mm.
seniors are,
Yeah.
are commenting on American politics despite not
Yeah.
being IR scholars themselves.
Mm.
So they must be something. Are you saying they're wrong?
No,
Or are
I'm not
you
saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying that it's they could spend their brains as something on something else.
Mm, all right. Well, we'll see about that because right now, so just for today, like let's repeat. Right now, we are asking why why do we care? Why do we Filipinos care about American politics? And should we even care?
Yeah.
And hopefully, you might join the conversation later on. But for now, let's start. I think I mean, for one thing, we have to make this clear first. It is, of course, important that America right now, is still,
Mm,
although a declining superpower, still
mm,
a major power in the world right now. So of course we have to pay attention somewhat,
mm,
but we kind of still pay attention to a level of detail more than our neighbors. We pay more attention to it than Japan, Indonesia, Thailand. So
mm,
we know more about a country in another hemisphere than in our immediate neighbors. So why
mm,
is that? Well, perhaps it could be done by, say, our colonial experiences. Back in after like the initial revolution against the Spain, we had a war with
mm,
America, and then until then we were occupied up until 1945, until the end of
mm,
World War II.
mm.
Well, no, but well, forgot we were under the Japanese for three
For a
years,
while,
and
yeah.
then for a while. But and during that time, those short 50 years, I think we have our basic political blueprints are based
Mm,
on American politics. The three branches of government: legislative,
mm,
executive, judiciary, our public education system. The fact that we're still speaking English and not Spanish. They actually taught us English. You know, yeah, and even to this day, right up until this day, when we need to write something, we go where? Not to the carinderia, but to Starbucks. When you're hungry, we go to McDonald's or Jollibee, which is arguably a version of McDonald's, a
that,
localized version
that's
of McDonald's.
that's so middle
Yeah.
class. That's middle
Oh,
class.
So I mean, yeah, you may think that we can explain that later, but for now, we can have to establish that our past is riddled with American influence. In fact, that's what Mark Twain, a famous American writer, said. Like, the Philippines was America's first temptation to be an empire and to, in a sense, father this young nation. We
Mm,
became, if essentially, our their little brown brothers, which again, it's
mm.
demeaning, but with what we are, we we're still somewhat a version of them. So, what do you have to say to that with regard to our colonial
Yeah,
past?
that's the thing. Regarding your summary of our colonial past, the thing is, we must distinguish first and foremost America as an object and America as a product of our imagination. Because, yeah,
Mm,
fair, Mark Twain, of course, said that, but if my memory serves me correct, Mark Twain was also at the head of an anti imperialist coalition
mm,
back in the United States during that time, during the Philippine American War. And that's the thing, there's a difference between, as I have observed in your summary, and I think your summary is shared by many Filipinos, those who pay attention to the United States. We are not trapped, or not really trapped, but we are not tied with American influence per se, but more or less delusions of how we look at
mm.
America. First and foremost, the Philippine
Why?
American War, we someone can easily say, yeah, we lost the war because America was superior. Well, fact is, the Philippine American War was basically the predecessor of the Vietnam War. We could have lasted
Mm,
4 months, and the United States would have more or less been forced by their own people to fall back because at that time the home front was under threat. American citizens never saw invading the Philippines as worth it, and they're taking on so many casualties by fighting our guerrillas.
mm-hmm.
So we are
Right.
so that's a narrative that is excluded from this American centric delusion.
Right.
That
Mm-hmm.
narrative that we could have almost won Philippine American War.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
I just want to
It's funny.
emphasize that.
Mm,
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that separation between America as a concrete object and as a product of our imagination.
right. speaking of imagination, a lot of it has to do with like the writing of our history and how it is
Mm,
taught. And the thing is, we know it as a war, but funny, I think if you look at our stats, our
mm,
largest listenership and audience is from America. And if you're listening, you probably know that in your textbooks, you might not know that you even had a war, but it's actually
mm,
just a rebellion or a skirmish in the
mm,
Philippines. But basically, we were taught it's a war because we want to be nationalistic, but perhaps in reality, it might not have been much of a war. Maybe a fight by certain factions of the elite, head led by Aguinaldo at the time. And it wasn't much of a war. Maybe there were a lot of people who were pro federalist, they wanted assimilation with a rising power. So it might have been, well, it's a part
No,
of possibility, but
in a
at the
fact,
same time,
it was a war.
yeah.
In fact, it's not a possibility that
Hmm.
it was not. In fact, it was. Was basically a
Okay.
fact.
Well, but the thing is, well, yeah, but again, there are interpretations of history, and the fact
Mm.
that it's quite possible that
See,
uh,
there's a misalignment
what?
between fact and our imagination. There's a
Mm-hmm.
sheer misalignment.
Mm.
The American public at that time saw it
Mm-hmm.
as a
Go now,
war,
you.
a costly war,
Uh-huh.
an unnecessary war. That's the American public at that time.
Mm-hmm. There were even like political cartoons, saying that we're not. Why are we doing the Philippines? Right, you remember that. Mm. So, in other words, this fixation was also a product of the American institution, but the way that it's continued to be taught, you know,
Mm.
like even they say the nationalist writers, like Teodoro Agoncillo's Nation, they
Mm.
still or even Renato Constantino, they
Mm.
portray America as an empire.
Mm.
So if I understand it correctly, even these national narratives are promoting America as this giant empire. Is that still overblown?
To
Are you
one
saying that?
extent,
Not really.
it's not overblown. It's not a matter of America being an empire per se. What I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
point out is our delusions made us emphasize or rationalize our defeat at the hands of the United
Mm-hmm.
States instead of
Mm.
recognizing the fact that we gave them one hell of a war. And if
Mm.
things would have been different, we would have forced them out, or they would have been forced out
Mm.
by their own public. So
Right.
we for centuries we have rationalized our defeat and just placed, yeah, we got defeated by this great empire, hence our defeat
Mm-hmm.
doesn't seem that bad. When in fact
Mm.
we gave them one hell of a shit.
Right. And notice even our heroes, were chosen and portrayed and
Mm,
rewritten almost by America.
mm,
Rizal is our national hero by
mm,
American declaration.
mm,
Even our imagining of our supposed hero of Tirad Pass,
mm.
Gregorio del Pilar, was embellished by American journalists, when in fact his death was quite uncinematic.
It was a meh. It
So
was a meh
that's an
moment.
interesting point. It was a meh. When in fact he portrayed him to be like similar to the old Western generals,
Mm,
portrayed it to be like a modern Thermopylae,
mm,
a
mm.
small band of Filipino soldiers against America. When that's part of it. They wrote our history for us, and we
Swallowed
ate it
it.
up. Oh,
Mm,
all right. But let's move on to, besides, of course, imaginations. What about the actual structures? In a people we're taught that, well,
mm,
not number one, our public education system is undoubtedly American, and our three branches of government are based on America. Now, today,
mm,
an application is not one to one. We have our own adaptations, but its skeleton is still
mm.
American. Don't you think there's still something that we need to learn because our basic blueprints are still the same? It's shared by a common ancestry or
Mm.
common origin. What do you think?
Regarding the American educational system, since you raised that one, and I've been not really dealing, but I've been into the works of John Dewey for the past few months. I can
Mm,
say that we have the defects. We have the defective American educational system as far as Dewey is concerned. So you have here an
mm-hmm,
American philosopher, pragmatist, one of the fathers of pragmatism,
mm-hmm.
whose pedagogy emphasized
All right.
growth and practice,
Mm-hmm,
criticized the American educational system.
mm-hmm.
And so we have that. We have the defect.
Right. Hmm.
should,
Yeah,
should,
we have the defect.
yeah,
Yeah.
we have the defect.
So here's the thing. So we have the defect. In a way, we inherited that. Doesn't that tie us even more to and give us more responsibility to reflect on that relationship?
Yeah, defective. Simple as that.
Yes. In other words, it's also a cautionary that because they have these defects, shouldn't we also observe them to see to how to avoid those defects?
It's like looking at that's a thing. Okay, fair. I would
Yeah.
concede with that one. But how we look at the United
Mm-hmm.
States would shift away from it being an ideal to being a defective entity,
Mm-hmm.
which is in itself a
Right.
radical shift. Which
Mm-hmm.
to an extent, I do agree.
Mm-hmm.
Should we pay more
Let's
attention
talk.
to?
Okay, while we're on the topic of similarities,
Mm,
let me just share something. Like, you know, the reason why, like, I told you this, like, the reason why I'm in political science is because my best friend at the time uh, was in political science. So I asked him, "What course are you teaching? Like, are you taking for in applying for college?" Political science. So I wrote down political science. But what made me stay was basically the election of Barack Obama because it's so cinematic. It's well telegraphed, and in a way, that hope for like a different, progressive, idealized, perhaps version of like a politician to have for Philippines can be is actually seems possible. Because John McCain was a good, well,
mm,
himself was a good politician, but the fact like the sheer will of people wanting for another kind of president, perhaps because of his ethnicity, partly. Yeah, and in a way that kind of had a momentum towards the way we frame our Philippine elections, which was shortly afterwards. So at 2008, I think was Barack Obama, and then right now it's like Benigno Aquino, the third, Pinoy. I don't know. So this was flawed. This is a young person, doing. So it's like that story of which necessitates our, that story of people voting for this one individual as an idealized version or the idealized representation of all the people's interest is kind of what fuels our imagination when we vote for our presidents as well, and for better or for worse. So again, this is a childish me of like why I
mm,
continue to fascinate over politics because it's also very dramatic.
mm,
And perhaps that's the same way people see it. It's a
mm,
story that the same um like perhaps anybody and like even an African American can
mm,
become president one day.
mm.
So talk about that, maybe that connection between the way we choose our leaders.
But then again, that is not something that is rooted with our relationship with the United States. Our leader-centric tendencies
Mm,
have been here ever since. I can agree that American elections feed that frame, but it did not
mm,
build it. We did not derive it from our relationship with the United States. It is endemic with
right.
us. But yeah, it resonates. It resonates with those who dare to observe American politics. But
Mm-hmm.
again, the mechanisms that receive it is endemic. We are leader centric, first and foremost,
Mm-hmm.
and I think
Right.
that more or less shaped how we adapted American institutions. Going back to what you raised earlier, we adapted it in line with such
Mm-hmm.
leader centric tendencies. Hence, we have a strong executive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. So, and speaking of which, this might be a quick,
Mm,
how you say, aside, but not only do we literally get our institutions, or frames of institutions, but also political science. The father of political science right now, Remigio Alpalio, like, was educated in America. So a lot of our disciplines right now were imported
mhm,
in that way. So I think our orientation of political science is quite American until, of course, Alpalo himself created his own spin on them, which is the
mm.
colonial regime, and things like that. So is we kind of owe a debt to America for being political scientists as well, though.
Uh, that's one thing. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
how do you understand what American political science is?
Mm, same ways and how a lot of it is still based on elections. A lot of like our current discipline is how you say activated during
Mm,
elections mostly. Based on the
mm,
market. but at the same time, focusing on democratic values at the same. So yeah, we still talk about democracy and lack thereof. But at the same time, you're right. We've started to move on from that, but our
Mm.
roots in Philippine political science are still quite American. Don't you agree?
Mm, probably with the focus on institutions, I would
Mm-hmm.
concede with that one. But as a
Mm-hmm.
discipline, if my understanding is correct, American political science went more quantitative eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
this is where we split up. Philippine political
Mm-hmm.
science became more qualitative as far as my understanding is
Mm-hmm.
concerned.
Mm-hmm.
So again, to our listeners who are in political sciences, you can correct us if I'm wrong with this evaluation. But that's one thing. There's yes, we may have started the same place, but we ended up different directions.
Mm-hmm. And I think Kahlo also was another American educated scholar. But again, yeah. So, well, that's
I think
another topic for
yeah.
another podcast.
No,
But
no. I think we
something
can
to
tackle
think
that
about.
one.
Yeah.
Do you have any ancestors that are American educated?
Ancestors. Well, ancestors. I have cousins who are American educated,
Mm.
literally. From one is from Wesley and the other one is from Berkeley. Another one is I forgot the another one, but yeah, they're educated in American universities right now. Cousins, Huh.
Cousins.
And I think even to this date, students still aim to go to Ivy League schools because they know that these are the top schools of America, and not just in the Philippines, but the rest of the world. You know, perhaps let's also talk about that. If it's still like, since I think the rest of the world kind of still sees America as
Mm.
some sort of center, albeit a declining one. Do you think we should perhaps follow that fascination with him, or
Uh,
we can do have enough room to step away and step back?
yeah, the-
Like even China
yeah.
right now, the
Mm.
Chinese students, like you and I went to China Jiaotong, and they still talk about going to America, going to Harvard,
Fair,
going to.
fair.
It's still attractive to them, and there are a lot
Mm.
of Chinese students in America, even though their
Mm.
own country is a rising superpower. They're still going to America. So
Fair.
to a point, America still represents a certain standard. You know.
That is something that is not uniquely American.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that is the fate of the Athenian Empire. When
Mm-hmm.
it was defeated
Oh
by
yeah.
Sparta, Athens ceased to be a military superpower. It became an intellectual center. Then it
Mm.
finally collapsed. So basically, that's the last step before it dies. It becomes
Oh.
a cultural and intellectual center. So yes, American
Mm-hmm.
America can serve that purpose. Then it
Mm-hmm.
dies.
Uh-huh. Yeah, when it dies. All right. Ooh. Actually, okay. Okay. Let's talk about that. So, is there's a value in watching something decline when it's just so, how you say, painful to watch, really? Like, even though
Painful,
yeah, but okay, maybe not for you,
entertaining.
but for a lot of people, it's entertaining. Okay. I mean, for a lot of people who've staked their hopes in America, the idea of America,
Mm.
or perhaps to see any country, regardless of your relationship with it, it's still quite sad, especially when a lot of Filipinos, all of our
Mm.
relatives, a lot of our friends
Mm.
still go there and aim to immigrate there. In fact, they're one of the largest immigrant communities in America. Shouldn't we at least watch it at least to know how they're doing? You know?
No. For my American
Yeah.
friends, well, I do sympathize with my American friends. If yes, it
Mm-hmm.
is it is their country, and I do extend my sympathies
Mm-hmm.
to the current conditions. But to Filipinos who
Mm-hmm.
still see the Philippines as an ideal, well, aha to them,
Mm-hmm.
they'll see their idol fall.
Uh,
And I'm not
the
saying
America.
this out of
You
spite
mean
for the
America?
United States. Yeah, and their idol would fall.
Mm.
It's more of the thing is
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying this merely out of spite against the United States. But then
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm biased against the
Right.
United States. Fine, I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
it out of spite. Anyone who
Mm-hmm.
idolizes the United States is a meh. So not good.
Mm-hmm.
Good luck to them if they idolize it. But
Right.
I'm also
Mm-hmm.
saying this from the perspective of I think I mentioned this earlier, but
Mm-hmm.
we are looking at the wrong America. We're looking at
Mm-hmm.
the wrong part of its history.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. So if people would keep on looking at American politics, better look at American political history instead, because that I think
Mm-hmm.
is far more valuable for
Mm-hmm.
our case for the Philippines. than looking at contemporary American politics.
Right. For those of you who perhaps haven't listened to the previous episode, or those of you who have, you might have noticed in the last in the last session, like Borge is
Mm,
particularly interested in, the founding fathers, early American politics. He mentioned Andrew Jackson, and I
mm,
think, you and I share a appreciation for its
mm,
the history of the American Revolution.
mm.
Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton. In fact, even there are Filipinos that love Alexander Hamilton. Because of its right.
Musical.
We can move on to the cultural,
Mm,
influences later, which still exist today. But I think, how do you explain that, your own disconnect? Because you seem to appreciate and even
mm,
valorize American founding fathers, and
mm,
yet their immediate successors,
mm.
that which are still connected, and people continue to try to harken back to. You kind of ignore the contemporary political, American politics. Why is that?
Because first and foremost, we Philippines, again, whenever we look out, why do we look out? I always assume that we look out to compare. I assume that it is automatic. We look at American politics because we
Mm,
compare, consciously or
right.
unconsciously. If it's unconscious, better be aware of your goals of that one. And I hypothesize that we look at the United States because we still see it as an ideal.
Mm,
I concede that one. That's a sad reality for me.
mm-hmm.
Still see it as an
Right.
ideal. It's sad not because it is foreign. I will not say that
Mm,
earlier Borge would probably say it is sad because it is a foreign influence, but no, 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 no.
mm-hmm.
It is
Right.
sad because we are looking at we use as an ideal the results of a process instead of
Mm,
looking at the process itself. That's why I'm saying that we're
mm,
looking at the wrong America because we are looking at the results of whatever they did instead of looking at how they did it.
mm.
So
Okay.
that's why there's a disconnect. That's why I am thoroughly interested with early American politics, and I'm not in any way
Mm-hmm.
obsessed with contemporary American politics.
Sure. Mm. I think it's part of it because, well, that is interesting, and to a point, I agree. But I think it's also important to know that, despite the processes that
Mm,
you admire, I think it's also important to know that the fact that it is the way it is right now is still important to study. The
how?
the
No,
product,
seriously, how?
because
How?
yeah, because obviously, even though you set up a constitution, there are people or parties that still abuse it. Even with the best of intentions and all their efforts, it's still capable of degrading to the way it is today. And it's important to know that. It's important to know, for instance, like, okay, for me, let me start
Mm,
arguing, saying, I think whether we are like no matter how much we want to
mm,
differentiate ourselves, I think it's or like to avoid, or try to emerge and grow out of
mm.
our colonial influence. I think it's important to say, because it's literally watching literature before our eyes. Only it's history. The thing is, it's the same way why we watch or movies or look at plays with the person making the same mistake again and again. It's looking at drama. And when
Hmm.
they make mistakes, we need to learn from those same mistakes over and over. It's similar. These are characters.
Mm.
These are changes of fortune. They're like, so it's the same thing. So even if it doesn't affect us, we still have things to learn from it. And
I
the
agree.
difference is, even the stories of these tragedies
Mm,
have effects to us, albeit indirectly.
mm,
But this is like watching, it's like
mm.
watching the important, like an important play, so we can learn from it. Yeah.
Okay, you keep on mentioning learn from it, learn from it. Okay, fine, fine, fine.
Mm-hmm.
I do concede that one. And then you discussed, let me just summarize what you said. You discussed learning from how a constitution is offended, degraded. What is more valuable?
Mm-hmm.
What is more valuable? Let me ask you and our listeners, what is more
Mm-hmm.
valuable? Looking at the drama of a constitution being degraded or looking at the drama of a constitution being strengthened? What is more valuable for Filipinos? Did we ever have a strong
uh,
constitution to begin with?
Mm-hmm.
Because I see the drama of the American Constitution being strengthened and modified through time as far
Mm-hmm.
more important than looking at how it is being degraded right now. Because that is where
Right.
we are positioned right now. The thing is, if we
Mm-hmm.
compare the Philippines with contemporary American politics right now, it's like
Mm-hmm.
comparing a child with uh, an old man who is either what we call senile
Mm-hmm.
or haunted by his
Right.
past.
Mm.
So yeah, I do agree
Well,
that there's value
well.
in looking
Let
at the
me.
drama,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but what is more
Right.
valuable? Hmm.
It's weird. I cannot seem to see the dichotomy with what you're saying. Like, why is there? Why are you putting a dichotomy with it being strengthened with it being violent? Because in a way, it is being strengthened every time it is being defended and amended. Every time it is challenged. It's the same way that we understand a body, and it is strengthened every time it recovers from sickness. After it gets sick, it
Okay,
builds up an immunity. It's part of the whole story
that
of like a body or a constitution.
that is a drama that you can locate in early American politics. Not really now.
True.
Now
So,
The
mm,
Constitution right now in the United States is just in the defensive. Constitutional
mm,
protectors of the Constitution are just mere protectors. But
mm-hmm,
before, as I have said, early American politics, it is
mm,
again another point that I would like to say is we may focus on the results of American political history.
mm-hmm,
There's value in it. But what is more valuable, that or spirit of experimentation that many people fail
mm,
to grasp?
mm,
America was supposed to fail. In the eyes of also many countries before, it was meant to fail, but it succeeded.
mm. Right.
Now, the people who look at American politics can either settle for the shallow shit, meaning looking at the results,
Mm-hmm,
instead of going deeper and see
mm,
how America did it, how its experiment succeeded, and more or
mm-hmm.
less
All right.
uh, imbibing the experimental spirit itself. I think that is what drove Bonifacio to read the history of the United States or the lives of American presidents. I think
Mm-hmm,
Bonifacio himself was attracted not by America's this system, but
mm-hmm,
America as an experiment. And I think that is
mm-hmm,
lost because of this obsession with contemporary politicking among
mm-hmm.
American politicians.
Mm. 'Cause I don't know, but the way that you can interpret events or history,
Mm,
like, no, come to think of it, when you see something happen or degrade to the way it has today, I
mm,
mean, the fact that freedom of speech is actually being contested and destroyed. Even the statues of Abraham Lincoln and George
mm.
Washington, despite being great men, are now being torn down. I mean, don't you think that the fact that the great actions of the past are actually quite fragile, and so the past needs to be protected in the present? Don't you think? Don't you agree? And the fact that you have to be alert at the same time. So in a way, you have to, in order for you to truly value the past, you have to be alert and actually, well, and for
But
the Americans now, they're the ones
mm.
protecting it. But for us, it's to learn the lessons again,
but the
that
thing
how
is, yeah.
fragile the past is, the foundation is.
But the
Yeah.
thing is, we don't have the same quality of history as the United States. We just don't.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So the problems that they have right now, albeit valid in their context,
Mm-hmm.
is not valid for us.
Mm.
Now, some people would say, yeah, what about issues that they're addressing? What about social justice issues that they're addressing? Fine, I would
Right.
concede. But what about the degree of it? There's a
Mm-hmm.
difference. The degree of we may share the same problems, but it is
Mm-hmm.
not as widespread. First and foremost, we're not racists. or
Not
we
as
we or
much.
we not as much. Again, you validate my point.
Yeah.
The matter of degree. Okay,
Mm.
as far as John Dewey said, no
Mm-hmm.
individual or group will be judged by whether they come up or fall short of some fixed
Mm-hmm.
result, but
Right.
by the direction in which they are moving. That's
Mm-hmm.
one thing. So again,
Mm.
we must try to free ourselves from an obsession with fixed results from what is
Right.
happening now. Okay, let me give you an example. Fine, you have Trump versus Biden right now, 2020.
Mm-hmm.
What is more valuable for the Filipino experience? That or the elections of 1824 and 1828, wherein Andrew Jackson, a populist, survived
Mm.
mudslinging imposed centrist politics,
Mm-hmm.
more or less widened, or I think it was dubbed by
Mm-hmm.
Huntington as a wave of democratization
Right.
of
Mm, I
populism.
mean,
Who's more comparable to Duterte right now, Trump or Andrew Jackson?
mm, well, I mean, it's weird. I still find the like the way that
Andrew
way you
Jackson
highlight
actually
more
killed
the
people.
past. Just a moment.
Hmm.
The past, the American past history and its current present. Because the way, how about consider the possibility that the past wasn't as different from the present?
No.
Yes, you're right. There was mudsling, and the way that there is mudsling today, there's still, uh, well, there's, yeah, can't you say that? Like, perhaps the way that it was written, is they focus on certain things, but in reality, there was mudslinging, and even the individuals, the politicians, had their own scandals. And Alexander Hamilton was brilliant, but he was also, uh, like the most promiscuous man in the colony. So, perhaps that past is idealized. But in reality, even in the present, the same debates of strengthening the constitution still happen. Well, not well, of the same
Mm-mm-mm.
nature, but not exact details. But
That's the
yeah,
thing.
like there are still people defending, strengthening, and attacking democracy. There's a line, don't you think?
The thing is, yes, those general categories exist. General categories,
Mm-hmm.
but they're general categories. The
Mm-hmm.
specifics, however, are different.
Mm-hmm.
The
All
issue of
right.
race may have existed in the United States ever since its foundation, but the issue itself have changed. Again, it's a
Right.
matter of degree if we are
Mm-hmm.
going to compare.
Mm-hmm. All right. Maybe perhaps to qualify it more, let's move on to the next topic. So rather
Mm,
than moving from the past, let's talk
mm,
about the present. And right now, because of globalization, because of global capitalism, I think we still consume a lot of American culture, products, values, even.
mm.
Because I'm gonna think it's funny. Like right, just this morning, it's there's the singer of MYMP
Nope.
did blackface of
Yeah,
Jimi
I think
Hendrix,
I
and
saw the news.
yes, and apparently people said like, "Oh, Black Lives Matter. Why?" And it's like, "Ay, Black Lives Matter yan, kalokohan yan." Diba? So it's funny, like this. It's the same kind of conversation that you know it comes from America,
Is it really
and
the same?
well, the words perhaps we can qualify that later, but let me finish.
Mm,
um, at the same time, even when I discuss with my students, there are still certain keywords that they somewhat emulate, like social justice,
mm,
Black Lives Matter, anti-fascist, fascist, you know and of course this is part of the problem, but at the same time it's something we have to contend with. And like there are people uncritically
mm.
and sometimes unconsciously reusing the language, and a lot of our culture actually is adapted from America,
Mm,
so it's something that we have to deal with, I think.
mm,
Like the same way how a lot of our movies to this day are still patterned over American 80s rom-coms,
mm,
like Star
mm,
Magic, or or how like I said earlier, like we still eat in McDonald's
mm,
and Jollibee, although right now more and more people are eating in Sangyup. So it's a shift to Korean hegemony,
mm.
maybe a cultural hegemony. But how about that? Like, what you say about people? That more and more people are starting to think like quote unquote Americans, even though clumsily aping American discourse like social justice, or even on the other side, I like a lot of mega churches are patterned after after American Protestant,
Mm,
models. And at the same time, it's influencing the way people vote and the way
mm,
people perceive social issues like
mm,
marriage, gay or whatever, divorce, abortion,
mm.
etc. What do you have to say about our present, which is, starting to coincide with the American present,
It's not. It doesn't coincide with the American present. It coincides with the American
Mm,
past, because our
mm,
pattern of
mhm.
consuming American culture is this, to an extent,
Right.
far more similar, I think, to how
Mhm.
Americans consume British culture.
That's a good point.
Americans
Yeah.
saw Americans saw themselves as British. They emulated. the British in
Mm.
fashion, in
At
ideas.
least the forefathers.
No, even before that, the sense their notion of political rights. They saw themselves as Englishmen.
Hmm.
That's one thing. But
Right.
the moment America became America, the moment it started on a path to greatness was the moment when
Hmm.
they accepted the reality that they will never be at par with the British. That the British would always consider them as second class citizens. Hence, you have the issues
Mm.
coming in, taxation without representation just fueled this feeling. So that is where America made the break.
Right.
So that's one thing. That is one thing that we need. It's not
That's a
about
changing
our,
image.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's not about our present coinciding with the American present. It is our present coinciding with their
Hmm.
past because we are consuming in such a shallow level, the same way that they did with the British.
Aping.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. They aped the British. Now we're aping America.
yeah.
Hmm.
So take the next step.
And don't you think? Yeah. So the fact that you concede, well, in a way, conceded that, we are coinciding with their past, isn't that a stronger argument to know that right now, their present can actually be our future? And so if we don't analyze it and watch it right now, don't you think that, we might follow the same fate?
No, you know why? Because
Why?
the future cannot be predicted. That's one thing. If you
Mm,
want,
you're right. That's true.
if we want to analyze our future, we look at our present, not at someone else's future.
Mm,
That's how Machiavelli saw the future of Italy as a united nation.
mm-hmm.
It did not
Right.
look at the decline of the Roman Empire. It looked at how the Roman Republic was founded. That's the same way that the
So,
United States saw
mm,
its future.
mm-hmm. Right.
So yeah. So to those who are consuming American culture, I am one of them. I am one of
Mm-hmm.
them. I
Right.
I, I grew up under all the Western movies and war films. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, I am as
Mm-hmm.
much as consumer of American culture as most people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But we need to take it further.
What do you mean take it further?
We go back to the past. That's one thing.
Back to the past.
Yeah.
Samurai Jack. Back to the past. Mm.
So
All
what
right.
about you?
Uh,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
How can you craft? How can you see a Filipino future out of America's present?
No, the funny thing is, I'm not saying that we can't predict it, but I'm saying it's a possible trajectory that anyway needs to be avoided.
Mm.
It's like it's possible to make, I suppose, similar if not the same mistakes, and I think it's well, come to think of it, you can also say that history is being made in the present.
Yeah.
So, and in a way, perhaps someone's present is just as good as someone's recent history. So it's like mm, it's a certain level of distance. Like again, like I said, it's like watching a certain play and the drama. It's still
Mm.
important to learn from it. So I suppose that, but I also agree that I suppose to over equate our two histories would be too much. So there's a way to calibrate our analysis. So I do agree that we do have to a point, in a calibrated way, but you know, still, we still have to look at it right now. Trump and Biden,
Should
all the
we?
more.
Should we?
Especially when, yes, because precisely because of how a country that represents the like freedom and liberty, freedom of speech, constitutional democracy, all the more, I think the fact that it can break down means that our current fragile polity, I'm not calling it democracy, is even more fragile. It's so yeah. How do you say? I think it's not a comparison, but it is a reminder that even the strongest nations can actually crumble the way it does now. You know.
That
Anyway,
that
go.
mentality is something behind. Sadly, just
Hmm.
to be honest, that mentality is something behind our notion of embedded mediocrity. So we avoid instead
Mm.
of moving forward. And
What do you mean move forward?
that's the thing. Okay, first and foremost, the America falling apart. Comparing it with the possibility of the Philippines falling apart is like
Hmm.
comparing a skyscraper fall down with a shack being torn down by a
Right.
storm.
I, I,
So these are two different.
I mean, I'm not sure people will get your yeah,
No,
get your metaphor. So you're gonna have to
let's
speak
just
plainly.
two different buildings falling down. Two different buildings falling down. They have
Mm,
very different physics
mm,
behind it. That is how. That's what I get from your idea of looking at the United States as a cautionary tale.
mm.
Why not look at the United States
Well,
as an inspiration properly?
mm, mm, but it already is. That's how
No,
I look at it right
properly.
now.
It's not.
But
It's not an inspiration.
wait,
Properly. Mm,
just okay, just a moment.
mm,
Because, and I think I've said this already, and I think you sidestepped it. There are again people who are aping American particularities, mistakes, like the same way the social justice warriors, the students are aping social justice warriors who are
mm,
hoping to cancel. You know, people are
mm.
canceling people now. Like
Mm.
so, the fact that it's possible that even though if it's aping these gestures and culture, don't you think that it's necessary to look at, learn from that, and perhaps how are they responding to it? You know, the fact that the
Uh,
same germs are being found here, social
no,
justice,
you're
and the
encouraging the
same
aping.
conservative, yeah.
That's encouraging the aping. Why not call them off and
Mhm.
just say that you're aping it?
Well, isn't it easier to say, look how America is right now with that discourse rather than saying, um, just I mean, it's more to say like, look what that discourse is leading to in America,
It's
how it
easier,
is breaking
yes,
apart. Hmm.
easier, but
It's
it's
to
of less
illustrate the
value.
folly of it.
It's
What is of more? How would you? Okay, wait. Instead of
mm,
saying you're aping it, how would you substantiate aping it, and how would you give them an alternative? Because again, that's how I do it. It's easier, but it's the most palpable way. This is the fruit of this. This is the causality. It's data right in front of your eyes.
mm.
Instead of okay, but you say no, you're aping it. How would you substantiate that point?
And this is something I tell my students. If you want to look at
Mm-hmm.
the United States as a democracy, look at the spirit behind it, the process
Mm-hmm.
behind it, the history
Mm-hmm.
behind it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I do it. Instead of them
Mm-hmm.
aping American liberal democratic ideas, they should look at how it
Mm-hmm.
was formed, the context where it was formed. And if they want to look
Mm-hmm.
at change and freeing oneself
Mm-hmm.
from colonial ties, then look at the
Right.
American colonial experience itself. That's one
Mm-hmm.
thing. Again, I think I'm taking on Machiavelli's path to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't,
Right.
like Machiavelli, I don't look, I have ideals. That's one thing. There are ideal types for me.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of looking
Mm-hmm.
at it, instead of trying to equate my present with that ideal, you look
Mm-hmm.
at the history of how that thing was
Mm-hmm.
made. And that is not hard, that is not easy. Yes, it's not
Mm-hmm.
easy, it's not palpable, it is not catchy, but that is how it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
If we are to, as I've said, move forward, or to be more specific, if we are to take
Mm-hmm.
this discourse away from our delusions of what America really is.
Hmm. Like like I can't
Mm,
seem to. I can't see because it's like dealing with an incomplete story because it's part of a saga. It's like watching episode 4 without episode like 6. You know, the way that even though it ended on, or like even though episode 5 ends on a tragedy, you know that it win in the end in episode 6,
mm,
or
what?
the opposite. You know, it's like
Mm. Okay,
it's
okay, okay,
focusing on one episode rather than another.
okay, okay. Yeah,
So it's
okay, using your analogy, I think I can say that focusing on contemporary American politics is just looking at episode 6 without knowing what the fuck happened in episode 1.
mm, mm, okay, but I think don't you think it's what I'm saying is
Mm.
watch episode 1 to 6
Yeah,
to know the full
that's the
saga.
ideal. That is the ideal.
Hmm.
Even
Yeah,
I think we would agree both. We would both agree with
right.
that one. That's an
Hmm.
ideal, but we have limited brain cells.
Well, that's my philosophy as a scholar. Although, and I assume this was yours as well, that although we are also curators of the past,
Mm.
we are also innovators for the present. And I think
Yep.
that's what, and yeah. So, and I think we also have to be ready to deal with like a apparent questions right now, especially
Mm,
when it is done with our, like, someone that is related to us. Like, to borrow your metaphor,
mm,
I think there is value in, like, a young boy watching, perhaps you could say, their grandfather undergo their own, like, his own mental decline to Alzheimer's, because it's a reminder of, again, what they can be if they are not careful, if they don't take care of themselves. And they actually also know his life story. Perhaps he was a drinker, perhaps he was a drug addict, or I don't know, or perhaps he was also a war hero, perhaps he was a virtuous man, but in the end, it's important to know that eventually he ends up the way he is. So yeah, I'd say, again, um, I agree that we value the past, but it's also a part of a continuity. And I say, look at the whole. That on the one hand, yes, the foundations of America, are important and are laudable, but also their foundations are fragile,
mm,
and that where it goes wrong and falls apart
mm,
is, what we have to look at, not necessarily
mm,
just aping, because I think that's
mm.
what you and I are arguing.
Yeah.
It's not an exact correlation.
Mm,
At the same time, we have to look at the entire antiquity, both the
mm,
past and the present,
mm,
and perhaps moving forward to the future.
mm. And
Mm.
that's something that I would wholeheartedly agree with. But
Mm-hmm.
again,
Mm-hmm.
given that we have very limited brain cells, short attention
Mm-hmm.
spans, and not everyone can
Right.
focus on the
Mm.
entire continuum. I hope they can. I
Mm-hmm.
hope the social circumstances will allow it. But if they can't, I would still
Mm-hmm.
argue that it's better to look at America's past.
I think we've
Yeah,
covered a lot of ground, and it's a
yeah,
very
we did.
interesting discussion.
Yeah,
Although kung nabibitin kayo, mga PI, nabibitin kayo, ask questions,
yeah. Ask
hopefully we
questions.
continue it.
Yep,
But for now,
yep.
yeah, for now, let's have recommendations, and hope
Woo.
we're looking forward to your own recommendations as
Mm,
to how to supplement this
yeah, yeah, yeah.
discussion. So, what do you have for us today?
Oh, okay. Okay, I will recommend two pieces. No, no, three. Three. So two documentaries and one movie. Again, just part of my advocacy of looking at America as a historical entity, in present. So I would suggest that
Mhm.
I think both are available on YouTube. If not, yeah, you can find it somewhere else. But the
Mhm.
PBS's series on the American Revolution, it's a relatively old series around the 90s, but it's still it's valuable. It tackles the United States as a colony until it became, until it started with its constitution and construction of its constitution. So 7 episodes, I
Mhm.
think, 7 episodes encompass that. And I think that would give a more realistic overview of what America is, what America was.
Mhm.
Another would be Road to the White House, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's by CNN. It's a series. It's a dissection of several key elections.
Mhm.
If people are still interested with American electoral politics, then again, in line with history, better look at earlier elections like Andrew Jackson versus John Quincy Adams, John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson, Lincoln versus, well, the Lincoln Douglas debate would be nice. So yeah, it's better to look at the past.
Mhm.
So in relation to
Mhm.
Lincoln, a movie that is close to me would be Lincoln, the movie. That's my last recommendation.
Starring, is that the this is the one
Daniel Day,
starring Daniel
yeah,
Day Lewis?
yeah, Daniel Day
Yeah.
Lewis, yeah, Daniel Day Lewis. So
Mhm.
this movie, I think it was a movie rendition of the book Team of Rivals.
Mhm.
So it
Mhm.
shows how the 13th Amendment, am I right? 13th Amendment was passed,
Mhm.
abolishing slavery through politicking, dirty politicking,
Mhm. Dirty politics. All right.
tied with
Dirty.
ideals. Yeah, tied with
Mhm.
ideals.
So, so even Honest Abe wasn't so honest.
Yeah, his election was
Mhm.
that like that.
Right. Which I think, and I think not enough people watched that film, so I love that film as well.
Mm,
There's something to learn that even ideals or ideas of America
mm,
are still dirtier than they actually seem.
mm,
It's just a story, but in reality, Abe was employed the same tactics we see today, of
yeah.
patronage, of bribery,
Mm,
but
mm,
he did what he had to do to free the
mm,
slaves. So
yep.
yeah, very good. For me, well, good that you're mentioning audiovisual recommendations. For me, I'm recommending a novel. Are you familiar with this? America is in the Heart.
I
Haha.
am I am
And
familiar with it.
mm-hmm,
It's like a heartworm.
yeah, you're familiar. Yeah. How'd you find it, by the way, when you read it?
That was way back in my undergrad, so I had bare.
Uh-huh. I was only exposed to it when I was teaching great works with Sir Oscar Salapco,
Oh.
great colleague actually. And well, I taught him as a team, and it's actually similar to what I taught with silence. This one is more closer to home. It's Filipino. It's an autobiography of Carlos Bolosan, and it starts off with a story of him growing up in the Philippines, and similar to like to a lot of us, we aim to be like America and eventually go there and try to make a life for ourselves. Similar to a lot of immigrant stories. And the thing is, it starts off, with ideals. In fact, what inspires him is the legend of Abraham Lincoln, because he was a poor man who eventually became president. And
Mm.
that, when I was rereading it, that lit up. And of course, that's the fantasy part. But when he actually reached there, he experienced, depression. He experienced discrimination, maltreatment. It has his own like hard realities, and at the same time, a renewed appreciation of America. And it's something that, of course, this was done way before. This was set in way before Philippine independence, when became a nation. It was actually set in 1920s and 30s,
Commonwealth time.
uh, Commonwealth time, perhaps. And I think I want to read a quick part,
Mm.
because I think this emulates, I think, my stance on our today's debate. Yes, it is an idea, but I think it's an important idea. And I think in a way, we should have a stake in what America is, and we have to rethink. All right. America is not a land of one race or one class of men. We are all Americans that have toiled and suffered and known oppression and defeat. From the first Indian that offered peace in Manhattan to the last Filipino pea pickers, America is not bound by geographical latitudes. America is not merely a land or an institution. America is in the hearts of men that died for freedom. It is also in the eyes of men that are building a new world. America is a prophecy of a new society of men, of a system that knows no sorrow or strife or suffering. America is a warning to those who would try to falsify the ideals of free men. America is also the nameless foreigner, the homeless refugee, the hungry boy begging for a job, and the black body dangling from a tree. America is the illiterate immigrant who is ashamed that the world of books and intellectual opportunities is close to him. We are all that nameless foreigner, that homeless refugee, that hungry boy, that illiterate immigrant, that lynched black body. All of us, from the first Adams to the last Filipino, native town or alien, educated or illiterate, we are America. It's beautiful. Gosh. I think
That applies to
this
Filipinos.
guy was illiterate. Yeah, that guy was illiterate. He didn't have a lot of formal schooling, and he managed to,
Mm.
albeit using American, like English, American language, and perhaps American models.
Uh,
Perhaps he had people help him, but still, he managed to articulate his desire for freedom
uh,
through his experience in both the Philippines and America.
uh,
And one thing I can conclude with is, uh, I think yes, we should care about American politics, but like you said, properly, in a way that knows our own,
uh,
a distinct history,
uh,
and as in America still embodies a kind of freedom, you know, a kind of multiculturalism, a kind of constitutionalism, democracy.
uh,
So we try to look at its pitfalls and look what necessary steps we have to do to found and maintain it, really. So, and to know the whole story from episode 1 to episode 6. So
uh.
yes, even the prequels. 7 to 9 is a bit of a is a bit of a debatable thing. Any last words before we clock out on this, on should we care about American politics? Was it changed in any way, or do you still,
Yeah,
I think this is the way you do? Yeah.
that's it. I think I do agree. That's the ideal. That's the ideal,
Mm-hmm.
just to learn from
Mm-hmm.
United States. But I would like to highlight
Mm-hmm.
founding, since we don't have something, instead of
Mm-hmm.
maintaining. Because what the hell are you going to maintain if you don't have
Mm-hmm.
it in the first place? So that's a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Can't defend anything
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't exist. So yeah,
Oof.
or that barely
Hmm.
exists.
Can't defend anything that doesn't exist. Is that a
Or
quotable quote you want
barely.
to leave on?
No, or barely
It's probably.
exists.
I mean, this is Halloween, so ooh, scary. We don't have a constitution. Ooh, or Trump's gonna be president again. Ooh,
Oh
scary
God,
thought.
that would be amusing.
or yeah, or Biden will be president, dies, and then Kamala will be president. Ooh, Kamala kabit.
Tingin.
Anyway, she's
Anyway,
scary actually. She's a legitimately scary person. Anyway, so that is our discussion.
great.
I don't know, nabitin ako actually, but I think for now, this is us. So hopefully you'll join us. Please send in your questions or rate us on iTunes. It will help us a lot. Or maybe send us through email or maybe in our Ask FM or in our
Facebook
wherever
page.
you are. Maybe talk to us personally.
Yep.
So yeah, and thank you for joining us. And until then,
Magandang gabi, mga ka-PI.
if you enjoy the jazzy tunes of this podcast, you can find similar works with John Victor Ordonez of the band John's Dirty Old Sneakers at Spotify and SoundCloud. The logo and design were done by Shin Miyamoto and Anthony Borja.